if you put cops with other cops, they're going to do cop work.
That's right.
And what was needed in the communities out there was more cops. What was not needed in the bloated bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. was a third of the FBI's workforce, because a third of the crime does not happen in the Washington, D.C. NCR area. And so the results speak for themselves. Our state and local partners, I've always said this, are our biggest ally, our greatest ally and partner. And we cannot do the work without them, but we got to send our guys to them.
That's right. And in regards to the last 4 years, the open border policies, whether it's terrorism, drug trafficking, human trafficking, violent crime, massive amounts of organized retail theft, and other types of criminal behavior. Can you describe, just so anyone who's listening here can talk about, how serious the levels of criminality have become in the United States?
Well, unfortunately, in order to have these record-breaking numbers of arrests and seizures, you tragically had to have a record-breaking explosion in violent crime, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it came in from all corners of the earth and from all platforms, including social media. And that's the root cause of all of these evils. And in order to clean it up, it's not going to happen overnight. But the men and women of the FBI, what they did in these 7 months, everybody should be talking about it. Every single district in this dais is safer now, today, than it has ever been because of that work.
And in regards to the ongoing political climate, Director Patel, how do sanctuary policies that are still being implemented and defended in certain states, cities, and counties, how do they help or hurt your efforts to make America safer?
Well, if you are harboring criminals, you are harboring our ability to keep our communities safe. It's that simple. If you have a fugitive warrant for a violent felony offense and we are not able to procure you because of policies or rules that don't allow us to go get them, and time again, we have heard all too many illegal immigrants who should not have been here, murdering women, murdering children, giving drugs to our youth, and raping our children, and that is unacceptable.
Straightly put, can you separate immigration enforcement with fighting crime?
They're intertwined.
Thank you. In regards to policies like cashless bail, how does that help or hurt your efforts?
Criminals know that there are certain jurisdictions where if they shoot someone, they'll be out the door within the next hour to do it again. And that's an ethos that is, and a system that has been built out over years that we are combating.
How is defunding the police around the country, how has that helped or hurt?
As long as I'm in this seat, we're not defunding any cops.
Good. Thank you, Director. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Garcia is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan, and welcome again, Director Patel. As members of the Judiciary Committee, we have a responsibility to conduct oversight of the FBI and assess whether or not you're doing a good job in a responsible and impartial manner, or whether you're just a henchman for Donald Trump, who's weaponizing the Bureau at the expense of public safety. As Congressman for tenure, is the Bureau's expanded role in low-level, non-criminal immigration enforcement. I have a report here from the conservative Cato Institute. They've obtained ICE documents showing that over 2,500 FBI personnel are now working on immigration enforcement. A yes or no question. Did you sign off on this?
2,500 FBI employees are not currently working on immigration enforcement.
Did you sign off on this?
On the Cato report?
On the 2,500 personnel, FBI personnel that have been reported to now be working on immigration enforcement.
Couldn't have signed off on it because it's not happening.
You can call it whatever you want, but the reality is that over 2,000 personnel individuals are now working at ICE instead of their jobs. I want to follow up on something that Senator Durbin asked you about yesterday. This article from MSNBC reports that nearly every agent on Baltimore's domestic terrorism unit, who was, by the way, investigating the 764 network of child predators, was diverted to work on immigration enforcement full-time. That forced them to, and I quote him, walk away from investigations of a network of violent predators that targets and exploits children online. Yes or no? Were you aware that this happened, and did you sign off on it?
The premise is false. The 764 network in Baltimore is taken down, and FBI agents do double and triple duty all the time.
I'm
to search
reclaiming my
resources
time.
where
You
necessary.
told Senator Durbin yesterday you didn't know about it, so your testimony is inconsistent today.
No, I found
Final
out.
question. Let me ask you again a yes or no question. Are you aware that agents have been told by supervisors not to documenting their shifting of resources toward immigration-related work?
That's a literal another falsehood. It's impossible to move a human being without documenting that work.
As FBI director, you must be transparent with Congress. You need to provide us information about how many agents have been diverted to non-criminal immigration enforcement, why the Baltimore unit was dismantled, and whether there's a cover-up of what's happening under your leadership, because this goes to the heart of whether or not you're carrying out the stated mission of the FBI, keeping our communities safe. Diverting FBI agents from investigating violent child predators doesn't make us safer. Using FBI resources to target parents, children, and other immigrants for low-level, non-criminal enforcement doesn't make us safer. Enabling violent, lawless conduct by federal enforcement doesn't make us safer. As we saw last week when an ICE officer killed one of my constituents. And I know that the FBI has been involved in that investigation. And yesterday, ICE did a raid in the suburb of Elgin where 2 U.S. citizens were arrested, and who accompanied them on that filming of that show? Secretary Nunn. Shameful conduct. And weaponizing the FBI to serve Donald Trump's political agenda instead of the American people does not make us safer. Before I yield back, Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to submit the following documents for the record. A report from the Cato Institute, which I referenced earlier, where ICE has diverted over 2,500 officers from their jobs. And 2, an article from MSNBC titled Trump's Deportations Divert FBI Agents Off Child Predator Cases, and an article from CNN entitled White House Pressure for Increased Immigration Arrests Strains Law Enforcement Agencies. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, the gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, by the way, for coming over here. Sorry you have to put up with all this. I know when you took over, the FBI's reputation in a lot of circles perhaps had never been lower. I mean, part of that is brazen involvement in political activity, the Foreign Influence Task Force, getting involved and trying to suppress news stories in the New York Post, Crossfire Hurricane coming up with bogus stories to try to flip the 2016 election, FBI downplaying the stories of Hillary Clinton's emails in the 2016 election. That's their overt involvement in political activity. I think a strong anti-religious bias. We talked about stories of an anti-Catholic bias in there. I know I've talked to people about horrific overreaction at the big Hindu temple in New Jersey, in which, just so people understand, you had a rectory in the temple area. The religious leaders, taken out at gunpoint, big problems. And I think finally the FBI trying to turn America's viewpoint on certain political issues. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about what was done in Mexico with regard to shipping weapons, fast and furious, shipping weapons into Mexico in an effort, I think, to try to turn the Americans against the First Amendment. But in any event, what scares me is, and all these horrible things that were done in the past, there were individual FBI agents who participated in them, in which apparently their supervisors told them this is okay or even admirable. And what I'm going to ask you, are you able to do anything to make sure that in the future, these corrupted FBI agents understand the importance of religion in our life, and they're not to view with suspicion? They understand parental rights and the idea that traditionally in America, parents have the ability to object when their young 5 or 6 year old children or year-old or very young children are getting what most people consider highly inappropriate sexual contact. What are we doing there to try to make sure we don't have problems with these FBI agents again, or make sure that in the future administrations, they would object if they are asked to behave in such a immoral fashion?
Two things. If you are corrupt, you don't work at the FBI. It's that simple. So we don't tolerate any form of corruption or any deviation from our high standards, whether you're an agent, an intel analyst, or whatnot. And just to show the American public the resurrection that the FBI has had in these last 7 months, you don't have to believe me. Our applicant pool has doubled month over month every year from the highest point it has ever been. More people want to work at this FBI than ever before in U.S. history.
I'm sure that's because of you, and you're kind of anticipating my next question. I talk to retired FBI agents in my area who sometimes retired in part because they hated the woke, anti-conservative culture at the FBI.
Charlie Kirk. Charlie was a good man, a happy warrior who fought for principles and values I think make our country special, and certainly was a strong proponent of defending the First Amendment, something this committee cares deeply about. I said this over the weekend. I think Charlie lived that scripture verse, 2 Timothy 4:7, fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. Charlie certainly lived that, and he did it with a smile on his face. And so the tragic killing happened a week ago while we were in markup here in the committee. And I know everyone, I know our witness was a friend of Charlie's, and I know many people in the dais were as well. So I know we're all praying for Charlie's family. And I would extend a moment to the ranking member if you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for saying that. The whole country reacted with horror and shock to the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk in cold blood. And there is never any warrant for political violence in America. And just as we all recoiled together at the shocking assassination of Melissa Hortman and others who died in that Minnesota attack, we all stand together categorically against political violence in America and determined to end these cycles of political violence that have traumatized the country.
Well said. Chair now recognize the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Schmidt, to lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As is customary, we will begin with opening statements. 5 weeks ago, because of the work of Director Patel, we learned that the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee and current United States Senator leaked classified information. We learned this because a whistleblower came forward. Whistleblower with 23 years experience in the intelligence community, a Democrat staffer on the committee, said this: they were pressured to leak classified information, which sort of raises the obvious question. Why would the head of the Intelligence Committee, the chair of that committee, who's supposed to be guarding our secrets, why would he be encouraging the leaking of classified information? Whistleblower told us that answer as well. The leaked information was supposed to be used, the leaked information, false information, was going to be used to indict President Trump. Now, the former chairman wasn't the only person leaking information. Jim Comey was also sharing things he wasn't supposed to share. Again, don't take my word for it. The Inspector General told us this. In his report, he said, quote, James Comey violated FBI policy by disclosing classified information. And what was Comey's motive? Same as the senator from California, to sabotage and undermine President Trump's first term. And we know that Mr. Comey's not been shy about what his objective was. In fact, 4 months ago, he told us, remember this? 8647, Jim Comey told us just 4 months ago. Now, how'd they do it? How did the former chair of the Intel community, the former FBI director, and others in our government attempt to undermine President Trump's first term? 7 weeks ago, because of the good work of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, we learned from another whistleblower, a second whistleblower, that in the closing days of the Obama administration, the intelligence community assessment was changed. On December 5th, 2016, they had one assessment. That assessment said Russia did not impact the election vote count. There was a meeting at the White House on December 9th, 2016, where it was decided, no, we're not going to have that. We're going to come up with a new one. And the new one said Russia was trying to influence election and did influence election, which just wasn't accurate. And that new one is published on January 6, 2017. Let's just show you a few things that took place. I want to show you first this email from Admiral Rogers, the head of the NSA. You can see it was December 22nd. Says to Jim, John, and Jim Clapper, John Brennan, Jim Comey. And he says, I asked my team if they've had sufficient access to the underlying intelligence, sufficient time to review that intelligence. On both points, my team raised concern. Further states, my folks aren't fully comfortable. A few hours later, there's an email back to Admiral Rogers. This one is from Jim Clapper, and it says this: it is essential that we be on the same page and all of us are supportive of the report in the highest tradition of, that's our story and we're sticking to it. We may have to compromise on our normal modalities. This is one project that has to be a team sport. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. Compromise on normal modalities, that's a fancy way of saying, that's the government speak for we're going to have to change the rules. In fact, we're not going to follow our own rules. And that's exactly what they did to get the objective they wanted, to undermine President Trump. Now, how did it specifically take place? The whistleblower said that the government officials ignored concerns about discredited information. And what was that discredited information? What was the discredited information that they didn't ignore the concerns about? What did they use, that discredited information? Of course, it was the dossier, the now famous Steele dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign when they hired the law firm Perkins Coie, who hired Fusion GPS, who hired the foreigner Christopher Steele, who wrote all this garbage and lies down. That is what was used to change the intelligence community report. And what happens next? What do Jim, John, and Jim do next? They go to Trump Tower on January 6, 2017, to brief then President-elect Trump about the dossier. Again, the Clinton-financed, foreign-authored dossier that the whistleblower knows is garbage and that they know is garbage. And then there's one final step. One final step. Jim Comey leaves that meeting with the president and immediately leaks to the press that they briefed the president on the discredited information. They briefed the president on the dossier and thereby giving it some credibility and creating the basis and the predicate for all they did to the president. They leaked false information. They leaked classified information. They used and leaked discredited information, and they didn't follow their own rules, all to sabotage President Trump's first term. And but for this guy, Kash Patel, but for this guy, we would never have known this information. The good people of this great country would not have known what took place 8 years ago when they were trying to undermine the guy elected by we the people. And I want to thank Attorney General Bondi. She set up a special strike force, a special team to look into this and see if there's any criminal liability that exists in what took place. Now, In addition to getting the truth to the people, Director Patel is getting the bad guys off the street. He's moved agents out of Washington, got the focus off of politics here in DC, and is instead putting bad guys behind bars. 21,000 violent criminals have been taken off the streets, which is a 125% increase from the comparable period in the previous administration. He's rescued 4,000 kids. He's got 1,300 predators who he's arrested. He's also ended the weaponization of the FBI. No more spying on parents at school board meetings. No more pre-dawn raids on pro-life Catholics. No more retaliation against whistleblowers. And he's given us information that Chris Wray didn't. Maybe said better, he's given us information that Chris Wray wouldn't. Director Wray didn't tell us that there were 26 confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, even though he was repeatedly asked about that by members of this committee. Director Wray didn't tell us that there were 17 of those confidential human sources who entered restricted space. 4 went in the Capitol. None of them were arrested. They weren't authorized to do that. They broke the law. None of them were arrested. Lots of American citizens were arrested, but the guys whose whose American tax dollars was used to pay these guys who broke the law, none of them were. One was recommended for charging and was not charged. And remember when Chris Wray told us that the Richmond field office memorandum on pro-life Catholics was just a one-off? Turns out he wasn't being square with the Senate either. Director Wray wasn't square with us. He told us that multiple other offices were involved in targeting the Catholics. We got that information from Director Patel. We learned from Director Patel the FBI actually surveilled a priest, tried to get the priest to divulge information, break the priest-penitent relationship and confidence that exists. And Director Patel is saving taxpayers' money. He's not going to build a new headquarters outside of DC. He's going to keep the headquarters right here in the capital city. Save Americans money, save the taxpayers' money. In 8 months, Director Patel has given us the facts. He's ended the weaponization at the FBI. He's taken bad guys off the streets, and he's saving taxpayers' money. But my guess is the Democrats won't focus on all that good news. They'll focus on politics. They'll stick with Comey and Clapper and Brennan and continue to try to undermine President Trump. That I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Director Patel. You and I have not had the opportunity to meet, and alas, you failed to respond to the 8 oversight letters I've sent you over the last 7 months. So we do have a lot of questions piling up for you, but I want to start with a word of praise. The first FBI director was J. Edgar Hoover, who steadfastly refused to hire women, African Americans, and other minorities as agents. And although he was a closeted homosexual who lived in domestic partnership for decades with Clyde Tolson, he also participated in anti-gay crusades. He aggressively promoted what we would today call white Christian nationalism. And he would undoubtedly be turning over in his grave to see as one of his successors a first-generation Indian American and a proud Hindu. So I congratulate you on being a breakthrough in this sense and being a beneficiary of the civil rights movement that opened up the FBI and the federal workforce to lots of people who never would have been hired in its first decades. Alas, you share J. Edgar Hoover's dangerous obsession with blind loyalty over professionalism and effective public policy. For Hoover, it was blind loyalty to him in keeping his secrets. For you, it's blind loyalty to Donald Trump in keeping his secrets. During your confirmation, it was widely noted on all sides that your primary qualification was your unwavering loyalty to Trump. Unlike other directors, you had no work experience at the FBI, but you had made over 1,000 media and political appearances in support of Trump's campaign. Your Senate confirmation vote was 51-49, the closest in history, with your opponents warning you were not qualified and had no interest in actually developing the qualifications for the job. I hoped that they were wrong. Alas, they were not. While most other new FBI directors drew on their experience as FBI agents, you didn't have that. But you did write a picture book trilogy for children ages 5 and up based on your experience clashing with President Trump's political enemies. In your book, you describe your literary alter ego, Kash the Knight, as a wacky, easily bored wizard carrying out King Donald's vengeance by driving his enemies out of the kingdom. In the books, King Donald is besieged by the evil Hillary Queenstown, but saved in the end by Cash. Then Cash goes on to catch mules who are stealing the 2020 election for the great King Donald from Sleepy Joe. And then in the third book, Cash takes down the dragon of the jalapenos, nicknamed the DOJ. Your supporters had hoped that you would graduate from imagining yourself a romantic fairy tale knight to actually running America's premier federal law enforcement agency. Alas, just as we've learned how dangerous it is to put a science-denying anti-vaxxer in charge of our public health, we've learned how dangerous it is to name as director of the FBI a man who thinks of himself as a fairy tale knight who keeps a fire-breathing dragon named DOJ at home to forcibly drive villains out of the kingdom. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, while his killer was still on the loose, you decided you didn't need to be at FBI headquarters in Washington to work with your team while the chaotic manhunt unfolded. You spent your evening dining in a swanky Midtown Manhattan restaurant and tweeting out false information that the subject of the shooting was in custody, a statement you had to retract 1 hour later. Your performance was so disturbing that even the mega base was alarmed. Culture warrior Christopher Rufo, who just a few months ago sat in your chair as a Republican witness, observed that you performed terribly, and he called for your ouster. The FBI might be able to survive your delusions of grandeur and the explosively volatile temper that was on display yesterday in the Senate, but the intractable problem is that you are running the FBI not as a law enforcement agency charged with keeping the American people safe, but as a political enforcement agency working directly for the president's vengeance campaign. 7 months in, it's impossible to overstate the destruction, chaos, and demoralization you've brought to the FBI and its workforce and the resulting danger your actions have caused to our country. You've been systematically purging the FBI of its most experienced and qualified agents, division leaders, and experts in counterterror, counterintelligence, and cybersecurity, precisely the people who have the expertise you lack, in which the FBI and the country need. They've been expelled from the ranks of the Bureau simply because they did their duty investigating crimes, including those committed by the mob that attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and beat the hell out of more than 140 police officers, or simply because you suspected them of being insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. You illegally sacked Brian Driscoll, the former acting director of the Bureau and a decorated counterterrorism expert who worked at the FBI for nearly 20 years. According to Driscoll, you told him your own job, quote, depended on the removal of agents who worked on the cases against the president, regardless of whether the agents chose to work on those cases or not. You added, quote, the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it. You forced out the leader of the Salt Lake City field office, Mehtab Saeed, just weeks before Charlie Kirk's assassination, depriving the FBI of an experienced counterterrorism expert described by her colleagues as absolutely the best and legendary. She would have led the FBI's manhunt had she not been fired. When Trump decided that rounding up immigrants with no criminal records was more important than preventing crimes like human trafficking of women and girls, drug dealing, terrorism, and fraud, you ordered the 25 largest field offices to divert thousands of agents away from chasing down violent criminals, sex traffickers, fraudsters, and scammers to carry out this immigration crackdown. Director Patel, you treated the men and women at FBI with disrespect and paranoia. You've assembled a roving band of freelancing henchmen within your office and charged them with conducting unauthorized investigations, targeting and harassing career FBI employees. Amazingly, you forced senior leadership to repeatedly take polygraph tests to prove their political loyalty and pushed out leaders who refused these demeaning exercises. And now we're seeing one very clear reason why you want to build a political FBI. The Epstein files. You want an FBI blindly loyal to Trump and to you as his enforcer so you can continue your cover-up of a massive international sex trafficking ring with more than 1,000 victims, betraying all of the survivors of the sexual violence. Before you got in this job, you called for full release of the Epstein files, telling podcaster Benny Johnson that the only reason the list was not released by DOJ and FBI was, quote, because of who's on that list. Upon your confirmation, you promised that, quote, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned. And anyone from the prior or current Bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued. This spring, you ordered hundreds of agents to pore over all the Epstein files, but not to look for more clues about the money network or the network of human traffickers. You pulled these agents from their regular counterterrorism or drug trafficking duties to work around the clock, some of them sleeping at their desks, to conduct a frantic search to make sure Donald Trump's name and image were flagged and redacted wherever they appeared, whether an email, a text, a letter, an interview, a photograph, or a video. In May, Attorney General Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name had indeed appeared multiple times throughout the Epstein files. And not long thereafter, in July, you and the Attorney General released a memo claiming that, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. In a few short months, how did you go from being a crusader for accountability and transparency for the Epstein files to being a part of the conspiracy and cover-up? The answer is simple. You said it yourself, because of who's on that list. Donald Trump's relationship with Epstein over the years is well documented. A week ago, the Oversight Committee released Trump's disturbing birthday book, Note to Epstein, written over a drawing of a woman's naked body, referring to a, quote, wonderful secret. The Oversight Committee obtained the note from the Epstein estate, not from the FBI, raising questions again of whether the FBI has been withholding documents. While you're unleashing the FBI to cater to Trump's desire to shut down the Epstein inquiry, the first 9 months of the Trump presidency have seen a spate of political violence and domestic terror events. We saw deadly attacks on political figures on both the left and the right. The brutal assassination of Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the attempted murder of Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, who miraculously survived a combined 17 gunshots. We saw an arsonist set Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence on fire. And of course, last week, we saw the horrific, cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah that has shaken the nation. 1 minute after Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, a 16-year-old shooter in Evergreen, Colorado, radicalized by white supremacist ideology online, opened fire and critically wounded 2 other students at Evergreen High School. We've seen lethal anti-Semitic violence, including the murder of 2 young Israeli embassy staffers just blocks from the Capitol, and then in the attack on a gathering of Jewish people in support of hostages held in Gaza in Boulder in June. We've seen continued mass shootings at schools, like the domestic terror incident at a Catholic school in Minneapolis last month, which killed 2 children and wounded 18 others. And in August, a man fired more than 500 bullets at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, killing a police officer who was a Marine veteran and a father. People like Melissa Hortman and Charlie Kirk should be able to participate in politics as elected officials or active citizens without being shot down in cold blood in the United States of America. People should also be able to go to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, to work, to the mall, and to church without being shot down in explosions of gun violence. The important position at the FBI requires a leader who puts public safety and national security and the rule of law first. I'm afraid, Director Patel, you've given us reason to believe you've used the powers of the FBI to serve Donald Trump and his agenda of partisan retribution. You've broken your promise not to do that. You've betrayed Jeffrey Epstein's victims and survivors. You've turned your back on the career law enforcement officers of the FBI. And as a result, you've left all of us less safe than before. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. That opening statement may have been longer than any book director's ever written or anyone else has written. Without objection, all of the opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness. Mr. Patel has been the director of the FBI since February of 2025. He previously served as chief of staff at the Department of Defense, deputy director of national intelligence with the National Security Council, and also as a congressional staffer, as a federal prosecutor, where he focused on national security cases, and he also worked as a public defender in the state of Florida. We welcome our witness, appreciate his work, and thank him for appearing here today. We begin by swearing you in. Director, would you please stand, raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. You can be seated as you are. You know, you've been through this yesterday. Did a fine job. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony. Director, you may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. I want to begin today by discussing the appalling assassination of Charlie Kirk. It's important for this FBI to be transparent without jeopardizing our investigations. So a little bit of the timeline is important. Charlie Kirk was unfortunately assassinated on September 10th. We immediately the next day released images early in the day in local time in Utah to start the public partnership in our manhunt for the assassin and culprits. At approximately 5 p.m. local time, I arrived on the ground and walked the crime scene myself. And we flew multiple FBI assets in and out to process DNA simultaneously while bringing in evidence response technicians, hostage rescue teams, and other experts to assist state and local law enforcement with their investigation. At 8 p.m. local on September 11th, the FBI collected and populated and promulgated at a press conference a video of the suspect on the grounds. We also released enhanced images. Due to that release that I directed and ordered, the suspect involved was apprehended and in custody at 10 p.m. local time. That's less than 2 hours after we did the video release and the photo release. So within 33 hours, that individual suspect was in custody, and his family, who has since been interrogated, specifically stated to FBI interrogators that because of the video that the FBI released at my direction and because of the photographs that they released, they identified their son, they confronted their son when he swung by their home, and that's what led to his apprehension. We are still, the FBI has that investigation ongoing, and it continues to be ongoing. And I want to thank the state of Utah and the state and local authorities there. And I also want to thank the Attorney General and President Trump for directing resources to allow us to conduct that investigation as we have. Under this administration, the FBI has arrested more than 23,000 violent criminals, 23,000 in 7 months. That's twice as many year to date last year. We've taken over 6,000 firearms off the streets. 6,000 guns are no longer in the hands of criminals in 7 months. We've identified and found and located 4,700 child victims. That is a 35% increase year to date last year. We have arrested 1,500 child predators. That is a 10% increase year to date last year in just 7 months. We've assisted our partners with countless counterterrorism operations around the world. We've captured at the FBI 4 of the most top 10 wanted fugitives in the world in 7 months. To put that in perspective, that's as many as my predecessor nabbed in the entirety of the Biden administration. We got 4, we got more coming. On top of that, in 2 weeks, thanks to the help of the CIA, we collected and captured one of the individuals responsible for the horrific Abbey Gate bombing that led to the murder of 13 service members. We did that in 2 weeks. They didn't do it in the 4 years of the entire prior administration. Nationwide, we've been executing our Operation Summer Heat, the FBI's national focus on targeting violent crime based on intelligence-driven operations. Ask the citizens of Seattle, Miami, Memphis, Charlotte, Chicago, New Orleans, to specifically highlight New Orleans and Nashville. There has been a 250% increase in violent crime arrests in those cities alone and other mid-major cities that I've just listed. In just a few short months, we have already unleashed 1,000 FBI personnel across this country. Every single state across this country is getting a plus up. This is a fiction that the FBI is short or that we are compromising the men and women in the field. They do not need to be in Washington, D.C., so we're sending them to the field to each and every one of your states. Because of that, crime is at an all-time low. We had to do it because of the explosion of crime. And maybe the most important stat for Americans to realize, in just 7 months, we are on track to produce the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history by double digits. Those are results not of mine. Those are results of the men and women of the FBI. You want to criticize me, bring it on. Do not attack the brave leaders in the field. We are also working 24/7, 365 on the opioid epidemic that is killing more than hundreds of thousands of people a year. We have seen 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl off the streets so far in 7 months. Year to date, 25% increase. To put that in perspective, that's enough to kill a third of the American population, 120 million Americans. 100,000 kilograms of cocaine and meth gone off the streets. Earlier this year, I highlighted in Cincinnati, Ohio, how we're getting creative to chase down those that were willing to do harm to our citizens, not just by striking at the heart of the fentanyl producers, but the fentanyl precursor companies in China. And we indicted for the first time multiple companies and individuals, not just in America, but in mainland China, that are producing the ingredients that produce and make fentanyl that kill our children. And we're going to keep going. Counterterrorism work, cyber attacks, and foreign adversaries are something the FBI must never sleep on, and we are not sleeping. In the counterintelligence space alone, this year, year to date, 30% increase in counterintelligence arrests from the DPRK, Russia, Iran, and China. And I want the American people to know, in this setting, there's a lot of work that the brave men and women in the FBI are doing we just can't get into, but they don't stop. Our cyber threats, ransomware attacks, those harming our children online. We have nearly a 20% increase in indictments arrests in 7 months alone this year. We're going after those that harm our malware, infrastructure systems, telecom systems, and energy structure. Combating SALT and Vault typhoons are just a little bit of the examples we're doing. Maybe most importantly, under the counterterrorism and domestic terrorism umbrella, are nihilist, violent extremists, and those that label themselves 764, who wish to go online and convince children to maim and mutilate themselves and commit suicide. And we are producing record numbers of arrests under that umbrella organization. We even stopped an individual in the 764 network who wanted to conspire to kill an adolescent girl. He is now in custody. Transparency remains one of my main priorities at the FBI. And this is what I've done in my 7 months at the helm. We've produced more than 33,000 pages of documents to Congress to a variety of committees, including, I believe, 7,500 to this committee alone, if memory serves me correct. To put the 33,000 in perspective, my predecessor in 7 years produced 13,000 pages in total to the United States Congress. His predecessor in 4 years produced 3,000 pages in total. I repeat, I have produced 33,000 pages in 7 years to this Congress and will continue to do so. I'm dedicated to restoring the trust and the mission and the integrity of the FBI, and we cannot do so without congressional oversight, and I promise you I will continue to do so. On the Epstein case, the original sin on the Epstein case was how it was handled by Mr. Acosta when he first brought the case in 2006, 7, and 8. The original case had a very limited search warrant, had a very limited search window, had a very limited investigative window. I was not there when those search warrants and that investigation was launched. I would not have done it that way. They were limited to only 3 to 4 years of investigations from 97 to approximately 2001 and 2002 to 2005. Mr. Acosta allowed Mr. Epstein to enter into a plea agreement where he served weekend jails for trafficking minor women. He also was allowed to relieve jail to go home on the weekends. Plus, he allowed a non-prosecution agreement to be signed as part of that plea deal, prohibiting future investigations from that prosecution and from that evidence, and prohibiting the collection of further material. That is the original sin. We are working with Congress to produce more than any administration ever has material on Epstein. And I welcome the challenge to tell us that we are not being as transparent as the law allows. We even went to court and asked the judges to lift those prosecutorial agreements and to lift those court order seals, and they denied us 3 times. Congress is welcome to do the same and join the fight. And I'd lastly like to focus on operation that the president led in DC. Because of this, we are taking this fight in DC to every single city across the country. 2,100 arrests in the last month alone. DC has seen a 60% decrease in gun crimes, 75% decrease in carjackings, and 53% decrease in homicides in our nation's capital. And rightly so. We're bringing that fight to the streets of America. I want to thank you for your support, and I'm proud to be the director that leads this FBI into a new headquarters building that they've needed for decades, saving the taxpayer $3.5 billion, and also providing our workforce a safe environment. If you don't know the calamity that is the Hoover Building, I invite each and every one of you to walk around. I'll give you a tour myself, and you can see where the cement falls on the heads of our employees that is only to be saved by netting. Just to give you an example. Thank you for support to our mission. And I do want to highlight one thing about DC. It's because the FBI gathered sources and evidence that we were able to, through our source network, identify the horrific murder of the DC intern, Eric Tarpinian. And I've spoken to his family, and we are working to bring them justice. And Mr. Chairman, in my 16 years, now my 17 years of government service, if anyone has any questions about my service, bring it on.
Thank you, Director. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Ison.
Director, delighted to have you here. You are a breath of fresh air. As you outlined, and I won't repeat it, the accomplishments, you did so with the same resources as your predecessor, roughly. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And so how much of that has to do with taking people out of the backside of the FBI and moving them into the field, into doing the job for which we primarily pay the FBI?
It's exactly what we needed done. 1/3 of the FBI's workforce resided in the National Capital Region before I got there. 1/3 of the crimes do not happen in Washington, D.C.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So 1,000 personnel of the FBI were deployed across this country on a permanent basis, and every single state in this union is getting a plus up, not a reduction, a plus up of 1811s of intel analysts and support staff. And that is why the crime rates are going down in record numbers.
Thank you for doing that. And it's perhaps the hardest thing for a bureaucrat to do is to lower the head count around them that support them. And I appreciate your willingness to do it different than your predecessor. A lot of what you covered earlier was the find, the discovery, and then the prosecution that is done by the DOJ. But I want to talk a little bit about the prevent side.
On the Charlie assassination, sir?
No, on all of these.
Okay.
Okay, for example, and I'll bring it up before the Democrats bring it up, January 6th. January 6th, we now know because of your find that in fact there were people involved who were not just observers, but participants who in fact, it's been alleged, and I personally believe, in fact, were part of promoting, perhaps even the one woman who died, encouraging her to walk through a door that led to her death. When you see that kind of activity, and you know it was done under predecessors with full knowledge, whether it's January 6th, where embedded people crossed the line, or any other activity, including obviously the Russian hoax that we're now dealing with up in, front and center. My question to you is, what can you or others do to prevent it from occurring again? Not on your watch, but on future watches. How can we know that this won't happen again the moment you leave the FBI?
It's simple. What I'm doing through our leadership cadre is having FBI agents do what they were trained to do, not what they were not trained to do, not put them in situations that both harm them and the public. We're also utilizing our SORT networks and prioritizing the threat structure to go after the narco traffickers, the counterterrorism people, the counterintelligence threats, and the cyber threats. That's what they were trained to do, and that's what we're letting them do.
One major question I have, after decades of doing this, on our side of it, both the chairman, myself, and others, both at oversight and here, have seen that the FBI and the Department of Justice hide behind non-statutory practices. Now, you've changed the interpretation of many of those practices. That's why we're getting the discovery that was previously withheld. How do we work together to make sure that we never again have false walls, non-statutory walls that say the Department of Justice has a prohibition about giving, quote, you fill in the blank, that has led to the chairman not seeing anything until you took over?
I'm wedded to aggressive constitutional oversight. Having been a House congressional staffer, I know that is an important part of securing our democracy. And the way we make it an everlasting, enduring process is by showing the American people the results of what we are doing and the important work of this committee and putting it out to them so they can see government waste, fraud, and abuse. And then they can demand from our constituents and our electors that they want this process to continue.
Last major question here. Some things are so sensitive that we both would agree they cannot be made public. Will you commit to this committee when it is too sensitive to disclose that you would at least make it available for in-camera review by the chairman and ranking members or others designated?
I have done that and I will continue to do that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a breath of fresh air. This is the beginning of what we need. But my questions today for the director are ones in which I believe that we do need to codify by agreement
or by statute if necessary, the kind of openness and transparency that we're seeing from this administration, the kind of discovery that's allowing us to do our oversight properly. And I would hope that that be the follow-up to this, obviously along with the Attorney General. And I yield back my 4 seconds.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Director Patel. In the wake of the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump said, quote, "Violence and murder are the tragic consequences of demonizing those with whom you disagree, day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible," close quote. I would note for the record that Donald Trump has famously demonized practically every person he has ever disagreed with, and therefore, using his own logic, he has put their lives at risk. I should know, about 2 weeks ago, when I announced my decision not to my decision not to seek re-election, many people on both sides of the aisle, including the chairman, offered me well wishes and thanked me for my service. Donald Trump, on the other hand, took to Truth Social to call me a, quote, "psychopathic nut job," among other things. Yesterday, I received a threatening note filled with anti-Semitic comments and hateful attacks that mimic some of the same language used by the president. I am sure many of us on this committee face similar threats every day. We have seen political assaults on both the left and the right. The attack on Charlie Kirk, the attempted assassination of the president, the murder of the Democratic Speaker of the Minnesota House, the assault on Paul Pelosi, and the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, for example. Director Patel, do you agree that there is political violence from both the left and the right?
There's too much political
Do you
violence.
agree, yes or no, that there's violence?
There is
yes
too
or-
much political violence based on ideologies from either side.
Do you, from either side? Okay. Are you aware of the study by the Cato Institute, a well-known conservative group, that found that 69% of the violence is from the right?
I'm not familiar with that
You're
study.
not familiar. Okay. I would commend it to you. Are you aware the administration has threatened to use violence as an excuse to crack down on liberty and freedom of speech?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
Are you aware the administration has threatened to use violence as an excuse to crack down on liberty and freedom of speech?
Nobody at the FBI is doing that.
I didn't ask you about the FBI. I said the administration.
I speak for the FBI.
I would like to enter the record an article from today's New York Times titled "Trump Invokes Kirk's Killing and Justifying Measures to Silence Opponents." In the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing, President Trump and his allies have laid out a broad plan to target liberal groups, monitor speech, revoke visas, and designate certain groups as domestic terrorists. I ask unanimous consent to insert this into the record. Thank you. Politicizing the murder of Charlie King to go after free speech is not a legacy I believe Charlie King would have wanted. Moving on, I want to address another topic. The FBI has traditionally played a key role in prosecuting public officials for corruption. But I fear that at a time when the president is accepting planes from Qatar for his post-presidential personal use, issuing pardons to major donors, and personally profiting from the office of the presidency, the FBI may be abandoning its commitment to investigating public corruption. Since its creation in the wake of the Watergate scandal, the Public Integrity Section has been one of the crown jewels of the Department of Justice, investigating and prosecuting corruption among the nation's public officials and acting as a key safeguard against politicized prosecutions. This section's work has been supported by an elite squad in the FBI devoted specifically to rooting out corruption. But according to reports, the Public Integrity Section has now been decimated, and the FBI's Public Corruption Squad has been disbanded. I would like to submit for the record a New York Times article entitled "FBI Dismantles Elite Public Corruption Squad." I ask unanimous consent. Thank you. These actions are an invitation to corrupt politicians to break the law, since they know that the government is asleep at the switch. Last month, Senator Warren and I, along with dozens of other members of Congress, wrote to you and Attorney General Bondi expressing grave concern over your decision to effectively legalize corruption and politicize prosecutorial decisions. And he asked unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record. Thank you. I don't have time today to walk through all your questions, all of our questions and concerns, but will you commit to answering this letter in short order so that we can understand what factors led to this decision and how it has impacted the ability to hold corrupt officials accountable?
I will review your letter with my team and respond as soon as I
You
can.
will respond. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for being here. I appreciate the change in the FBI and the tone since you've been there. We heard the ranking member, however, describe the FBI under your leadership as being resorting to political enforcement and you personally as being paranoid. I would just suggest that perhaps that is the projections of the ranking member himself and not you, sir. I want to refer to something that was said yesterday in yesterday's hearing by Senator Grassley. He said, it's well understood that your predecessor left you an FBI infected with politics. At your nomination hearing, he gave you records, made public records about whistleblowers regarding something called Arctic Frost. Arctic Frost was the FBI case opened and approved by anti-Trump FBI agent Thibault. And Arctic Frost became Jack Smith's elector case. The new records show that Arctic Frost was much broader than just an electoral matter. In fact, it was expanded to Republican organizations. Some examples of the groups that the Ray FBI sought to place under political investigation included the Republican National Committee, Republican Attorneys General Association, and Trump political groups. In total, 92 Republican targets, including Republican groups, Republican-linked individuals, were placed under the investigative scope of Arctic Frost. On that political list for investigation was one of Charlie Kirk's groups, Turning Point USA. In other words, Arctic Frost wasn't just a case to politically investigate Trump. It was the vehicle by which partisan FBI agents and DOJ prosecutors could achieve their partisan ends and improperly investigate the entire Republican political apparatus. I'd ask that, Mr. Chairman, that document be administered.
Without objection.
So I know that this may be under current investigation, but I wish to ask specific questions about this for just a moment. What search tools were used in Arctic Frost to view private communications of targets?
I believe the traditional search tools, search warrants, lawful service of process, and the tools that the FBI has in our infrastructure systems, cybersecurity systems, and counterintelligence systems. But generally speaking, if I may, I want to use this to highlight the fact that I'm continuing my promise to work with Congress to produce documents simultaneously and also conduct ongoing investigations. I'm giving you as much as I can, and I'll give you more when I can.
Thank you. Another question regarding that is, were there any directives from the Biden White House concerning the Arctic Frost investigation?
Were there any
directives or communications from the Biden White House itself concerning the Arctic Frost investigation?
I'll just rely on what was turned over to date, sir.
Okay. So I want to add here, the search warrants that were used included the seizing of a U.S. member of Congress, his phone. I think we all know who that was and how that was taken away and used for political purposes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director. So we'll leave that for a second, and let's go over to the Charlie Kirk case for just a second. Let's emphasize this. How many hours did it take from the assassination to the arrest of the assassin, Mr. Director?
33.
That seems pretty swift, and it was because of the actual release of videos and photographs that you directed to be released, sir.
That's correct. And to put it in perspective, the Boston bomber took 5 days and Luigi Mangione took 5 days.
Was the platform Discord forthright from the start with law enforcement about the shooter's communications on its platform?
Discord, the platform ownership, has been working with our lawful process, and we are obtaining materials from them on a rolling basis.
Thank you. And I want to get back here to Arctic Frost for just a second, Mr. Chairman. I'd like the unclassified document from the FBI released to be admitted to the record.
Without objection.
And a document from the Economic Times also to be admitted to the record.
Without objection.
So I'm going to give you the last 30 seconds. We could go on about the Epstein case. I've got a bunch about that, but I'm just going to let you, if you wish to respond to either of the two vitriolic questioning or statement from the Democrats.
The work of the FBI speaks for itself. It's on showcase here today. Anyone that wants to attack the FBI can attack me, but leave our leadership structure alone. When you have 23,000 violent felons arrested, twice as many as this time last year, the work speaks for itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Appreciate your good work, Director Patel. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, before you joined the FBI, you railed against it for covering up Jeffrey Epstein's human trafficking ring. Let me refresh your memory with this clip.
Has Epstein's list, they're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
So you finished that December 2023 interview with a challenge to the FBI and harsh words for Republicans in Congress for not getting the Epstein files out to the public. You can see this clip.
Boy pants, and let us know who the pedophiles are.
Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are, you said. You emphasized that the president and the FBI director each had complete authority to release Epstein's client list. You said Epstein's black book is under the, quote, direct control of the director of the FBI. Look at this clip.
This is way off the topic, but who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black book?
black book?
FBI.
But who? That is, I mean, there's.
That's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
All right, so you were sworn in as director more than 200 days ago. Now the black book is under your direct control. So why haven't you released the names of Epstein's co-conspirators in the rape and sex trafficking of young women and girls?
The Rolodex, which is what everybody colloquially refers to as the black book, has been released.
Oh, no, you're talking about what the journalist got 5 years ago? No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what you were talking about there,
That's
the black
exactly
book
what I
under
was
the direct control of the FBI director.
We have released more material than anyone else before. The Biden administration, Obama administration had the exact opportunities to release this material, and they never did. And if you are selling the men and women of the FBI,
Why
we're
have
not
you
going after
changed your
child
position?
predators. Hang on, you said we're not going after child predators. 1,500 child predators arrested this year, 35%
Okay,
increase.
I'll reclaim my time.
4,700 child victims
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to
found.
reclaim my time if you could instruct the witness. Why have you changed your position? There you were saying it's under the direct control of the FBI director and all of it should be released. Why have you changed your
Everything
position?
that has been lawfully permitted to be released has been released. And as I told you,
Really?
the investigation was limited. And let me make something crystal clear. I never said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic other people, other women, and they're not other victims. This is the investigation we were given from 2006, 7, and 8, and the search warrants from 2006, 7, and 8. That's what we're working with.
Well, wait, have you released all of the stuff that the FBI has seized from Epstein's house? The computers, the emails, the file cabinets, the documents? What about the financial records? Have you released all of that?
Everything the court has allowed us to
Which
release.
court are you talking about?
3 separate federal courts have come in and said.
We're
there are
talking about the
3
evidence you've got. It's got nothing to do with what those courts have.
Do you have any
We're talking
idea
about the
how the
evidence-
law works?
Wait.
Do you want me to break the law in a federal judge's order?
No, I want you to
satisfy
follow your own
curiosity?
word, Director Patel. You said up there it was under the direct control of the FBI director. He had the black
And
book.
everything I have direct control over, we have gone to court. You
And
haven't.
complete your
We went
sentence.
to court.
Everything you have direct
We-
control over, you
we
said.
Have gone to court, and everything we have direct
Director
control
Patel,
over.
complete your
and
sentence.
can
You said everything-
lawfully
Like to con-
release,
the
we're
gentleman-
releasing.
He'd like to complete his answer.
You began the sentence, everything you have direct control over, and then you stopped that sentence. You've released everything that you have direct control over?
And I have direct control over and can lawfully release. If you're not familiar with the court orders, that's not my fault.
Oh, I'm
Go look
perfectly,
at them.
I'm perfectly
to
familiar
court.
with them. But how did we prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell?
She was prosecuted with the investigatory material that was collected from 2001 and 2005 because of the non-prosecution agreements and the court orders on the investigations and search warrants. We were not able to develop new information. And oh, by the way, Jeffrey Epstein was out for 12 years and the Obama and Biden administration did nothing to look at his work, his pedophile network. If you want to blame me, that's fine. But now you're blaming the men and women who conducted
No,
this
stop
great
that.
search.
I'm not blaming anybody other than you. You're not keeping your word. You said that you would release all of the materials
Has
under your
anyone
direct
released
control.
more information on Epstein than I have? Has
Well,
anyone?
Much
Did
more.
Comey, did Ray?
Much
Did
more.
they?
Excuse me. Much more has come out in the days since the American people in Congress have been demanding it, but it's coming out in dribs and drabs. Why don't you just release the entire file as you promised to do?
I literally just told you, there are multiple federal court orders. I'm not going to break the law to satisfy your curiosity. You didn't join us when we filed court to release the court orders. You could have. You have lawyers. You could have shown up. You didn't do that.
That's a tiny fraction of the material we're
That
talking
is
about.
not.
It is
How
a
do you-
tiny fraction.
How do you know that? Have you seen
No.
everything?
Time
It's
of the
all
gentleman-
misdirection.
How do you know
Time
that?
of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Director. Just to be clear, how many of the Epstein files were released in the 4 years of the Biden administration?
0.
And how many have you released?
I don't have the number, but it's got to be thousands of pages of stuff.
I was going to ask you to begin whether Americans are safer today than they were 9 months ago, but you cited dramatic increases in criminal arrests since you've taken office, a dramatic decrease in crime that's resulted. Who would have thought that taking criminals off the streets would reduce the crime rate? But somehow we have stumbled upon that new truth. But it begs the question, what was the FBI doing during the 4 years of the Biden administration to see that dramatic an increase in work under your tenure?
The simple answer is I'm letting good cops be cops. We're working with our state and local law enforcement. We're energizing our partnerships. We're bringing on more task force officers. When you have more cops in the streets, when you're using ground-based intelligence, when you're not weaponizing law enforcement and focusing on DC and focusing on the rest of America, this is what happens. It is not a significant mind shift in terms of how we